So welcome everybody again. Now we'll have our first invited speaker, and I'd like to say welcome to Isabel Rocha. She is a PI of Systems and Synthetic Biology Group at ITTB and the prorector at Nova University, coordinating the areas of entrepreneurship, technology, and knowledge transfer. So thanks, Isabel, and stage is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everybody. It is great to be here, and it is my pleasure to be introducing Dr. Edward Cartwright, that will do our the talk now. So Edward has done his PhD in biological sciences in the Cambridge University, after doing a bachelor in physics in the Imperial College, and he has been doing. Besides naturally research, he has been doing consultancy in the area of pharma and life sciences, and now he's the CEO and the founding partner of the Cambridge Healthcare Research. And I'm sure he will talk more about his current activities. The title of his talk is Life After PhD Postdoc, making the jump into the world of business, which I think Edward has experienced in the first person. So it is really glad to have you here. Thank you very much for accepting to be here.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that introduction. And for that free promotion. I haven't actually been the CEO, and I'm not. I've only ever been one of the three founding partners. And you are right, though, because for the first 6 years of the company, the three of us were managing the business and running everything. So I feel like I deserve the title, but I've never been given it. So I think I'm going to talk to my guys internally. Can you see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up if you can. Brilliant. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very passionate about that jump between having a PhD and a postdoc in academia. And I was really, really scared in that sort of transition period. And I'll talk about that a bit later on. But one of the things about our company is that we hire PhDs, which it just happens to be, the path that we went down and what we've set up as far as a business. But it is a real pleasure to be able to, have a home, as it were, for PhD people that are looking for that next stage in their career. And companies like us aren't necessarily the right fit for everybody, but I'll get into that a bit later. So my name is Edward Cartwright. I have a PhD and I'm one of the founding partners of Cambridge Healthcare Research. First, let me talk about my path. So how did I get from PhD to further on? So I did my PhD in Cambridge. So my college is actually right in the center of that image there. To the left of Trinity, if any of you know what Trinity looks like, and to the left of King's and to the right of Trinity. And I kid you not, the dining hall looks like that. It looks like Harry Potter. So time in college was amazing because it's like you're a mid-20s Harry Potter fan running around going, I can't believe it. And this, unfortunately, was the institute in which I did my research, which doesn't quite look Harry Potter-ish. But that is the old building of the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, so the LMB. And yeah, a lot of really famous people have come out of there that have done some fantastic work. I think it was set up by Watson and Crick back in the day. And that lecture theatre that looks like a UFO, that was called the Max Perutz Lecture Theatre. Sadly, they've moved to a new building now, but it was a lovely building. It was old. There were fridges and freezers in the corridors. It was really charming. It was a wonderful building. That was my PhD supervisor. So if this wasn't going on YouTube, I'd make a joke about Satan, but I'm not going to. That is Sir Professor Alan Furst. So he is a knight of the realm. He's done some incredibly important work around protein enzymology. He's one of the big daddies of protein enzymology and one of the originators of sort of what is otherwise known as protein engineering. Very big contributions. He's a great man. but he's also a tough man. But he was a very, very good man to learn from. And that is some of the output of my PhD postdoc. So a lot of people think that what I did was nuclear magnetic resonance, but actually I was learning how to be an impressionist. So that's my contribution to the world of science. Let me see if I can remember the title of my thesis. It's been a while. It was the molecular basis of the genotype-phenotype link in the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome protein, which I think that syndrome is the primary cause of hereditary kidney cancer. Yes, I did some great work, but I didn't publish very successfully. So this is a little bit of a story of, if you don't make it in academia, there are ways out. So I was at the end of my PhD and my postdoc, and when I was at Imperial, all of my friends in physics, they all got jobs in investment banks or Reuters or places like that. And I remember thinking, yeah, I don't want to work for the man. I'm going to be a free spirit. I'm going to make a contribution to humanity and to our understanding of the world around us, whether it's macro or micro. I chose micro, going for molecular biology. And I think this just delayed the inevitable for me, which was, okay, now that I'm growing up, I have to decide what I'm going to do. And I'm absolutely petrified. And I was, the best thing about my PhD is that I met my wife there, so we started going out, and then all of a sudden, this very strange feeling inside me, it was like, I have to provide for my family. What am I going to do? So I got really desperate, and Cambridge is great, as in it's got a good brand, but when you go to the careers advice team, they only really know two things. One of them is strategy consultancy, and the other one is investment banking. And those are very extreme, and they're very competitive. And I wish I knew now I wish I knew then what I know now, which is there are so many different flavors of consultancy, so many functional consultancies that do lots of different jobs for lots of different sectors and industries. But at the time, I didn't see that. All I saw was strategy consultancy and investment banking. And I thought, if I don't get a job in investment banking, I will not have any career, and it will be over, and I'm not worthy of having a family. It was very bizarre. I think it was just midlife crisis coming early. And, when you push away I'm in my early 20s and I've actually got to grow up, I think I'd pushed that about just a bit too far. So I decided that investment banking was what I needed to do. And that was an absolute roller coaster. It was, getting in felt like a miracle in and of itself. There's not many people there's nobody that I knew who'd come from our background that had made it in there. And now that I think about it, there's a good reason for it, which is that people like us don't apply for those jobs. So of course the statistics are going to be against you. But for some reason, I just thought, if I don't get that, I'm in trouble. Thankfully, I got a job there. I'll go through what it took to get it, but this is a picture. You're not meant to take photographs in investment banking, especially. So our floor was mergers and acquisitions. So we were sitting on deals, we were doing lots of stuff. So lots of sensitive stuff on this floor. So this is one of my treasures, that I managed to steal a picture of where I was working. And so there's lovely David in the foreground, who's now really big and important in a private equity fund. But behind him, you can see, and at the time we were just the lowest of the lows. Behind him, you can see that little cubicle. So those cubicles are what people who do mergers and acquisitions will sit in for the first 9 years of their career. So you'll do 3 years as an analyst, so analyst 1, 2, 3, and then associate 1, 2, 3, and then vice president 1, 2, maybe 3, and then you become an executive director, managing director. Of course, lots of people leave on this sort of pyramid. It's not a horrible pyramid like academia, which is let's have millions of PhD students for 0.00001% of professorships. So it's a bit more egalitarian than that. So in those moments where you think that the big bad world out there is unfair, look at academia. But anyway, it takes 9 years to sort of get your own office. And on the left-hand side, you can see those are the offices that the sort of executive managing directors have, but they're never there because they're always on planes. And so your lifestyle is during the day. So you wake up in the morning, you're having your shower. I was standing in my shower every morning thinking, why the hell am I doing this to myself? Then you get on the tube, it's all nice and packed, or the metro, and then you get to work. And on the trading floors, they get in really early, sort of like 3, 4, 5. Whereas for mergers and acquisitions, we're getting at 9. So it sounds pretty good. But every night you're leaving between, if it's an early night, you'll leave at about 1 a.m. during the week and 11 p.m. at the weekend. But on average, it's anywhere from 4 o'clock is a good average. Sometimes it can go all the way to 6 a.m. The reason for that is because all of these empty offices, the people in those empty offices are flying around the world, meeting CFOs, meeting loads of important people, trying to do deals, because the bank only makes money when a deal is done. So what we're doing is we're slaving away generating these pitch books that basically say, you should do this deal. So let's say, for example, GSK, they had Quest Diagnostics back in the day. We'd put a pitch book together that said, your PE ratio, doesn't matter what that is, but anyway, your PE ratio is not looking too good compared to your competitors. You need to think about trimming off some of the fat. Quest Diagnostics doesn't really fit your 12-month plan. So why don't you think about selling it for 1.4 billion? We'll help you do that. And then the bank gets a cut of that deal. And so you're preparing about 3 of these type of pitch books every day. There's a lot of support. So there's a PowerPoint department that just builds slides. There's a sort of like an Excel spreadsheet department that do Excel spreadsheets. And we're basically putting this marketing material together. We're sometimes doing modeling as well if there's a big deal that's on the pipeline. If you're doing a deal, then you're doing less marketing work. But in short, you're doing a lot of things all the time, and it's absolutely exhausting. What I'll say though, so the lifestyle sucks. It's terrible. It was one of those things where it got to a point where my wife would come. I was having a bad time. The first couple of months, it takes a little bit to it. So for the first 2 weeks, people are telling you, so the first 1 week is training. People are telling you, you're not going to have a life. You're going to go to bed at 4 a.m. and come back into the office at 9 a.m. And you're laughing at them thinking, you can't scare me. I'm not 22. I'm not 23. I'm 30. I don't believe that stuff. And then after training week, it starts and you're like, I don't understand this. This is physically not possible. And then after 2 weeks, so the first week's terrible. The second week, you feel like a zombie. And then in the third week, you're fully functional and it's super weird. And you're living off adrenaline as well. So, you've got so much work to do that like you're buzzing all the time. So you're kind of high. It's kind of strange. But it was fantastic. So the work was amazing. The people were absolutely phenomenal. You hear a lot of bad stories about people in banking and investment banking. And I think that's a lot on the trading side. But this is corporate finance. So people that do this job for a career for a few years, they go off and eventually they become CFOs of companies. So, it's sort of like a business school training. And if I had to describe what this type of job is, it's more like it's strategy consulting, but with big capital. So, it's about divesting things. It's about buying things. It's about mergers, that type of stuff. So big deals, big capital, but you've also got to have the background for the strategy behind it. So if I was 22, 23 and I didn't have a girlfriend, I think I would have stayed. But I was 30, I had a girlfriend that I was committed to, and it just felt like it wasn't going to give me what I needed. I love talking as well. And it was going to take 6 years before I was going to be client facing. And as a 31-year-old, that was a bit too long. Let's talk about how to get a job like that if you want one. And I would say that any of you have the opportunity. If you want it, if you really want it, you can get it. First thing you need to do is you need to break out of the box. You've got to remember that you are awesome, and you happen to have a PhD. If you walk around being a PhD and saying, I am a PhD, and that defines you, that's going to make your life really difficult outside of academia. So remember that you are you and that you're more than your PhD. So raise the odds, don't play them. So I applied to 5 places initially, and I got an interview at one of those places, which statistically is bananas. I mean, that's really good. And I did the interview and I got to the final stage. So I think there was 1,000+ applicants, or 800 applicants. There was, I think, about 20 people who were invited to the assessment day. And then across the assessment day, then it came down to me versus another person. And this other person was, she was probably 22, 23. She'd done a corporate finance degree. She was really clever. She was really eloquent. I was watching her presentation and I was like, I don't stand a chance. And sure enough, she got it. So, good for her. But at that point, I could have said, you know what, I'm never going to make it in investment banking. I'm never going to get a job. But I didn't. I went away and I applied to another 25 investment banks. And applying to an investment bank, it's not, at the time, it wasn't a question of just send a CV and a cover letter. It's like an online platform that you've got to fill out loads of forms. You've got to say why you're awesome. You've got to say, what is the macroeconomic impact of the banana price on, Tesco's? Crazy questions like this that you're just like, what? And you're just like Googling furiously in the 20 minutes you've got to do that essay, just thinking, how can I bring a story together of stuff I don't understand? So I did 30 of those. After the first 5, I did another 25. And of all of that, I got 4 interviews, including that first interview. And I got to the final round of 2 other places. And, JP Morgan, which I didn't realize this at the time, but they're the premium bank, them and Goldman Sachs and a few others. But they made the offer before the other place. And I was like, yeah, I'll take it. Because I actually really liked the people that interviewed me. I thought they were, funny story, one of the people that interviewed me was from my school, and he was 4 years younger than me. So I'll tell you what, doing a PhD, you need to be humble, because you've got a guy who's 4 years younger than you saying, hey, I remember you. And you're like, yeah, I don't remember you. It's like, yeah, I'm 4 years younger than you. You don't remember me. And you're like, oh no, he's interviewing me. I've got to be really, how do I navigate this? It's like, anyway, so that was really funny, being interviewed by somebody 4 years younger than you, who actually is awesome at their job. So raise the odds. If you apply to 3 places, chances are it's going to be harder than if you apply to 30 places. So put in the hard work, it pays off. Learn, prep, learn, and repeat. I didn't know anything about corporate finance. Seriously, I mean, when I told my parents I'm going to apply for a job in investment banking, my mum was like, what? And then she was like, why? And she still didn't understand my reasoning, because my reasoning didn't make sense, but it doesn't matter. So I bought the CFA level 1 books. I didn't want to take the exam, but the CFA is the Chartered Financial Analyst. And I read these massive tomes of macroeconomics, what are derivatives, what are secondary derivative markets, loads of books about all that stuff. It was actually quite interesting. And that was a good sign that maybe I like doing this. And then the first interview, a lot of Googling about what are these interviews like? What do you need to be able to do? How do you need to think about them? What are the frameworks you need in your head? How do you put a value on a company? Because they'll probably give you a piece of paper with some limited information. They'll say, give me a valuation of this company. So you have to learn all these things. All the information's out there. So it's easy enough to do, especially with the skills that we have. And then even after that first interview, there was a lot of things that I did wrong. And so after that first interview, I had some time to reflect on what are the things that I could see in the interviewer didn't make sense to them. One of the key questions I come onto at the end. But yeah, or just if you want something different, don't be scared. Put in the hard work, learn as much about it as possible, because if you're committed to it, chances are people will see that. And if you're a PhD committed to something that you want versus a 22, 23-year-old who is just following a career path, chances are you're going to be a lot more compelling and you're going to be less of a risk to whoever's, offering that job. Back yourself, believe in yourself. There's a lot of my colleagues at PhDs who, when we came out, where we did our PhDs was a little brutal. So when we came out, we were all fairly damaged. And a lot of them just didn't believe in themselves. And so they would apply for certain things and it didn't really work. So they decided to do a postdoc and then 2 postdocs, then 3 postdocs. And it upset me because that's not what they chose. It's not what they wanted, but so somehow, no matter how brutal your PhD has been, you've got to dig deep inside you and you've got to remind yourself of who you are as a person outside of the experience that you've had. I loved my PhD, but it is such a special, unique journey that can make you a bit more reflective and a bit more doubt yourself. I don't know why. Maybe it was just my institute, but a lot of people doubted themselves a lot at the end of it. And I think just put all of that in a box. It's completely irrelevant for who you need to be and for where you want to end up. It's very self-indulgent. So put all of that self-doubt in a box. It's not going to give you anything. And just think about what you want and think about how you're going to get there. That's all you need to focus on. So just back yourself, believe in yourself. This is the key question. And this, I felt like I was being abused in these interviews. People would ask this question. There was 2 ways of asking this question. Genuine interest, like, oh, so why did you do a PhD? And then other ways, which was like, why did you do a PhD? And the question is exactly the same, because the question actually translates to, you are riskier to me than an ordinary standard candidate. I can get a graduate in here, we'll break him down in a couple of weeks, and then he'll be able to do the job the way we need him to do it. You've got a PhD, which means that you think you can think, but we'll still need to break you down and rebuild you. And that's going to be more of a challenge, because you think you've got, you think you're clever, you think you're the master of stuff. So you've got to answer that question in a humble way that makes sense. It's got to be a good story. It's got to be a reason for why you ended up there. For me, it was, I knew I was never going to stay in academia, whether it's because I didn't think I was good enough, which is kind of true, or whether it's because I just wanted to make one contribution for all the education I had. I just want to do one thing, and then I can go off and do something else. And so, I was thinking about all the skills that I'd gained and the ways that would make me a more valuable entry-level resource. And you've got to think about that. How am I going to be the best possible resource for where I'm applying to go to? Because if you go to that interview and you're talking about yourself, that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in making a hiring decision for somebody that's going to be awesome. So you've got to convince them that you're low risk and that you know what it is that they do and what it takes to do that job, that you've done your learning and your preparation, and that you're ready to come to work. You were the expert in whatever you were doing. You were the world leading expert in whatever you were doing for the past 3 years. And you're going to come with a different mindset, which is, I know nothing, and I'm going to learn. And at the bank, there was this fantastic example where this analyst, she had a job to do every Monday, which was she prepared the market report for the CFO of Novartis, which she could do super. She was amazing at it, but she didn't want to do that because her time was more valuable than my time. So I was given to her to do that market report for her. And she should, well, when she says this is going straight to the CFO of Novartis, you're just like you're super scared. And then you try and put this stuff together. You think you know how to do it. And the first 3 weeks, every Monday, I spent about 4.5, 5 hours delaying this deck that needed to be with the CFO, because I'd go back to her desk for her to quality control it. And she was like, no, this is wrong. You've done this badly. And so there you are. I did nuclear magnetic resonance. I was like all these equations, setting up these pulse sequences, really clever stuff. I can't format a PowerPoint slide. I can't format a table properly. I can't put the equations into Excel the right way. And it really hurts, because you're in front of someone who's a lot younger than you, who's basically in a polite way communicating the message that you're a moron, but in a, please get this done because this is late and you're making me look bad. And so you've got all of that weight of responsibility and guilt on you as well. It's, humility is very, very important. You cannot have enough humility. The less humility you have, the more pain you will suffer. So just rock up with humility. That's my advice. But also prepare your story about why you did a PhD. Why does that make you a better candidate than anyone else that they can bring in? And if you think carefully enough, you will work out why it is that you're a better risk than any of the other ones. So I realized 6 years was too long for me to be in front of a client. I wanted to be in front of a client. I wanted to take that type of responsibility, and I wanted to be their partner. So consulting in pharma, I was looking at loads of different things. I saw things that I thought were really exciting, boutique agencies. So at this point, I realized if you go for those big companies like McKinsey and Bain and investment banks, it's going to be a while before they trust you. So if you want high levels of responsibility, you need to go for a smaller company that does the right type of work that you're interested in. And because I'd had time in investment banking, and also that 3 months applying for jobs in investment banking, every time I got back to my CV, I was refining it. I was taking stuff out. It went from 4 pages down to 1 side of A4. Because if you want to compete in this job market, if you can't prioritize what you need to communicate to them that they need to hear the right way, you're probably not the right person for the job. And it's really difficult, because you think in your mind, I've got all these things that are great about me, but they don't care. What they care about is that you can prioritize and communicate effectively what they need to see. So that's what you should always do with your CV. Every time you do a job interview or an application, after you've submitted it, look at your CV and say, can I make it shorter? What am I communicating here? I put a long list of responsibilities I had. Maybe I can translate that into what skills it's given me and what attributes I have and how I've demonstrated leadership. You always want to tag what they're looking for with an example. Always have a soft example, and it just less than a sentence. It doesn't need to be anything big. For example, you know, some of the samples I had to make, I had to negotiate budgets. So I was using deuterated, I was using deuterium, and I was using isotope labeled carbon or carbon 13 or whatever, because that's what you need to do pulse sequences to get the energy in there. So I had to negotiate a lot of money for my samples, and you know, I was using minimal media. So every now and again, there'd be like 20K's worth of material that just died because my culture just didn't survive. And it's just like, oh my God. But the good thing is that then that turns into, yeah, I negotiated 150K's worth of resources to do my experiments, which I was going to get anyway because my supervisor needed this data. But all of a sudden, it makes you sound much more grown up, and it makes you sound like you understand the value of things, and you understand the value of your consumables, and you had to negotiate for them, which in some occasions you sort of did have to. You were like, yeah, I want to do this experiment again, please. And they're like, no, move on. And you're like, no, please, I want to do this experiment again. And they're like, no, it's 25K. And you're like, well, I'm not going to pay for it myself, please. So anyhow, so this step for me was really easy because I had a very good CV, because I'd refined it over the period of 3 months. I'd worked extremely hard on it. And I also had the backing of having been vetted and screened by one of the top investment banks. So anyone that wanted to touch me that wasn't one of the big firms was like, okay, this person's safe. So I met a couple of consultancies. They didn't really interview me. I had some really nice chats about what they did, about my vision, about the type of work, and about the segment. And I think that was enough for them to think, yeah, we want him on the team. So even though consulting is where I ended up, don't be worried if the first step that you take is not in the right direction. Use it, be tactical. So I joined this consultancy, and it was a bit of a shock, because so the good thing, I knew it was where I wanted to work, because I walked into the interview and I walked past the kitchen table and they had fruit. And the guy said, oh, you can have as much fruit if you work here as you want. And I was just like, you know, as a student, you're like, oh, I can have a peach and 1 strawberry, and I can have some grapes every day. That's amazing. I want to work here. But also the people were really nice, and they were all from a PhD background as well. So I felt much more comfortable. So you start off at the bottom. So you're a team member. You're there for the hours that you put in. You're there to do what other people are instructing you to do. Once you do enough of that work, if they trust you, then they give you more responsibility. So that's a PM, so a project manager. And at the project manager level, you know, they sell some business and they give the project to you, and your job is to make sure that you deliver against that project and against that budget. Really good experience, really good responsibility. You know, you're managing people to get a product made or delivery done. It's the lifeblood of these companies. Without project managers, these companies can't function. And then with enough time, you become an engagement manager. And that's when you start having a grown-up relationship with your client. And you're not just delivering a project to them, but you're saying, is there any other ways that we can help you? You know, we've given you this analysis. Maybe we should do a workshop. Maybe we need to call in your boss and a few of your other team members so that we can think strategically about some of the choices that we've got for the 2022 brand plan. So you can start having big boy conversations with people who are much more senior than yourselves, because you've got a specialism, and you can see across that specialism, and you can really help them think through what they need to do. I was very fortunate in that fortunate, double-edged sword. I was a good project manager, and I could work effectively with external resources. It was actually something I learned at JP Morgan. So at JP Morgan, there's a lot of research that needs to be done for these pitch decks, and they've got a research team in Europe, New York, Argentina, and India. So you can have a research work that basically lives for 24 hours and is worked on until it's completed. And you need to do that in order to turn stuff around in 24 hours. So I knew, and the first time you send out briefs, you get back junk. And you realize the reason I'm getting junk back is because my instructions are rubbish. And so you learn how your instructions and your communication needs to be on point, because you can't afford to not get back what you need. So I was very good at working with external contractors. So I was being given a lot of strategic and small projects to deliver on, because they knew I could do it. And so after 18 months at this consultancy, I looked at my project log. I'd worked on a bit over 30, probably 31, 32 projects, and I had project managed 20 of them, which I think in any environment is it's a bit over the top. It's a bit much. So yeah, on the personal level, I did suffer for that. It was a choice I made. Well, it's not a choice that my wife made, but she bared with it with me. But after 18 months, it was a fantastic transformation. I remember I was at this business development event, and I was talking to this person I'd never met before, and they were telling me, yeah, I've got this problem. This is what we're in the middle of. And I remember just being able to just dialogue with him, just dialogue about his problem, about what type of project we could do for him. And I suddenly walked away from that thinking, I've only been doing this job 18 months. I've just potentially sold a piece of business, but I wasn't phased. I knew exactly what to talk about. And I suddenly realized with that amount of brutal experience, I'd seen every flavor of problem that brand and product managers sort of have to see. So I would always have something to say. It may not always be, directly related, but I could weave it in there. So that's one of the beauties of consulting. If you go to a set role in industry, you'll learn very slowly. When you're in consultancy, you don't have a choice. You are forced to learn incredibly quickly because that's the only way that they have a successful business model. So I got to the engagement manager level very quickly, and I was then selling business. So that's BD, business development. So that's the process of bringing business in so that the company can keep on making money. On the side, two things that are really important to me are my interactions with others. So I want to learn from others, but I also want to help others in their journey of improving themselves. So, when you become a project manager, there's a big scope to be a coach. And some people do like to coach and some people don't. If you like to coach, you get loyal team members, and loyal team members will go above and beyond for you because they know that you're investing in them. So I think, part of my success has been investing in other people, and then that comes back to you. It just does. And then when you get more senior to PM, EM level, then you become a line manager. And that's when you actually take managerial responsibility for people in a business. And that's a big deal. That's their career development's in your hands. So you need to make sure that they are a productive member of the team for the company. But at the same time, you've got to be there to support them and to give them you've got to remove all the barriers to their success and to making sure that they can do what they need to do for the business. I loved all of this stuff.
We have just a few more minutes.
Just a few more minutes. I was promised 45 minutes and I've only had half an hour. Okay, I'll see what I can do with it.
Oh yeah, we have 10 minutes until we finish. But I wanted to have some questions. But
yes, of course. I'll see what I can do in 5 minutes. All right. So at the end of my time at this company, I had 3 paths open to me. So I was there for 3 years. I had a job that I could go to in private equity. I also I was actually offered the job of portfolio manager for Sandoz in the UK. And then probably the worst option, which is set up your own business. And I think there were 3 reasons why I decided to do that is because, 2 of the reasons are in this picture. So Max and Matteo, I was very fortunate that I found 2 people in this company, in the previous company, that I respected, I admired, I looked up to, and had the same ethos and ethic as far as what we should deliver to a client. The other thing is that I believed that what we could do could be done better and that the clients deserved better and that as a team, we could work and function better. What do we do? Very quickly, if you've got a pharma or biotech or a medical device company, anybody that's got a product in healthcare, CEOs at the top, sales reps at the bottom. In the middle, you've got these guys called brand or product managers. These guys are responsible for the quarterly, earnings every quarter of a particular product. So sales need to keep on going up or they need to not go down, basically. And we support those people. But thinking about the brand or product manager, there's a lot of people that we serve. We need to basically serve this guy or girl so that they can have a dialogue and they can make decisions about things that all of these other functions do. And another point I want to make is there's consultancies that serve these functions in blue. So if you're thinking, I don't want to do strategy or I want to do, commercialization, there's lots of alternatives around here that you can look at. But we work for the decision maker, for the person that needs to call the shots. A framework here that I really love. This is the Ann Beatson it's called Situational Strategy. So what does a client see and how should they be thinking? So you've got different frameworks that sit in here. Internal, external, the market, external, the sector, and then the macro world, stuff like pandemics. So we pretty much work here. So we'll work, for example, for a rheumatoid arthritis drug brand, and we need to make sure that it's selling well and that it's doing what it needs to do to stay competitive. So if some of you know Porter's Five Forces, we work in that circle that's in the middle. So we help our clients stay competitive in retaining or capturing market share. It's not as easy as just there's a product and there's competitors. You know, this is an illustration of how complicated the tapestry of our environment is. That there's so many dynamics at play that are shaping each other. And our value to our client isn't to tell them everything about all of these things. It's to be able to understand the tapestry and say, there are three things here that we think are critical right now for you in this marketplace. And these are the things you should do about it. So that's basically what we do. These are the products that we offer. It's not particularly interesting. My own firm. Okay, let me see if I can do it in 2 minutes. Year zero, 3 people. Yeah, lots of analysis about how do we lay 3 desks in a room. And we just decided to get 4 desks instead. Year one, 6 people. We broke into Pfizer. That was a big moment for us. I can say that just because Marjorie is now one of our strategic advisors, but that was what guaranteed our success in the early days. One of the 3 partners decided he wanted to row the Atlantic, and we had won 2 really big projects. So basically, one of our most important people decided to bugger off for 3 months. He made it, thank God. He didn't die, although the insurance would have been good for the company, but whatever, it doesn't matter. That's us. So he was on the sea having a good time. We were having a miserable Christmas party because we went back to the office. It was quite late. We went back to the office to finish those big projects. Year 2, we're 11 people. We had to move out into another office. Yes, that's what you have to do when you can't afford a photographer to take portrait pictures. You've got to do it yourself and use a whiteboard as like a sun reflector. 18 people, more space, foosball table, absolutely very critical. You want to feel like you're Google. You want to sell yourself as, we are Google, come and join us. And then we opened an office in London. That was a really big step for us because real estate in London is very, very expensive, but we couldn't recruit enough people in Cambridge, so we had to go into London. This is just to say that we had to develop a real company. We had to develop our own culture, our own responsibilities, our own job descriptions, you know, big boy stuff. So it wasn't just we're 3 consultants with a team. It's we have to set up a real business. Yeah, we brought in some people to help us along recruitment. So this year, year 4, I felt like one of my days every week was just back-to-back interviews, and I was mentally exhausted because I was just meeting people all the time. So then we decided to get the whole team to get involved. So we started doing assessment days, and now that's just brilliant. We moved into an even bigger office in the center of London. So this is in Shoreditch, which is very fashionable because we're just growing faster than we can handle. And I promise you, every time you sign a lease agreement at the numbers that we're signing them, it's just painful. Because I still remember who I was when we were 3 guys in an office who didn't know how to arrange 3 desks. And then all of a sudden you're laying down 200K for an office. You're just like, this is ridiculous. This is disgusting. I hate it. This is the 5-year celebration. This is probably the proudest thing for me. We made it to 5 years and we all got together, 2 different offices, people internationally, and it was amazing. It was the whole day was just like a family came together and we did loads of activities and it was just beautiful. Then we hired a CEO because at some point, I've never been trained as a CEO. So the 3 of us were completely out of our depth as far as structuring, running, and delivering a company to our people that they deserve. So we brought in a professional CEO. We won a Queen's Award, which is like a knighthood in the UK because most of our sales are international. So we're bringing in a lot of cash from the US and from Switzerland. Year 7 is now. What is there for me? For me and my future, I'm now on the board. So I don't manage the business anymore and I don't run client projects. Now, me, Max and Matteo, we think about what the future of the business is. What are the verticals? You know, we're developing a market research branch. There's a lot of things that we can do. We need to develop a China strategy. We need to develop a US strategy. So there's a lot that we need to do as far as developing the company. So we've brought the management in to manage the business. We've got a fantastic team. And now the pressure's on us to deliver to our team a company that they will want to stay at. So the pressure's on us. Take home messages. You've got a PhD, your future is bright. Everybody that I know that has a PhD that I grew up with along the PhD track is doing awesome stuff today. So even when you're really depressed and you've given up on yourself, it will work itself out, don't worry. Believe in yourself, you have to, you just don't have a choice there. And there is absolutely zero reason not to believe in yourself. So you got to do that. Fight for what you want, work hard, think smart, dedicate yourself to your next move, and you will get where you want to be. It may not be in the first move, so be tactical. If it takes a couple of moves, think about what are the 3 things I need to do to get there. My wife, for example, she's now in strategic marketing. As a PhD person, you can't apply for strategic marketing. So she did some dirty jobs that got her to this awesome job now. Consulting is tough, but super rewarding. I loved, and I still love every minute of it. We recruit PhDs. We have people working in Portugal for us as well. So if you're struggling, apply to us. There we go.
Thank you, and sorry for putting some pressure.
That's all right, don't worry. I'm used to it.
Okay,
I'm a consultant.
Thank you very much. This was really, really great, and I think it was very useful for everybody. I'd like now to open for a couple of questions, and it's literally a couple. We don't have time for more than 2. So please raise your hands virtually or no hands. Anybody seeing any? Philippe?
Yes, Philippe.
Hi, that was a great sprint in the end. I never saw someone like delivering the message this fast. But my question would be, how long did it actually take you to then in the end provide for your family? Because that was one of your main struggles, right?
Yeah. That's a great question. I always forget that part. 4 years. And it's really difficult because you're winning business. You're working extremely hard. You've got people who you're training up. So to some degree, you're doing most of the work. You're winning all the business. You're spending a lot of your time training other people. So you're doing all the work. And for the first 3 years, all the money coming in is paying their salaries and paying to keep the lights on. And that gets progressively harder as time goes on. So I'd like to say we got lucky. We made the right choices in order to come out of that and in order to be profitable enough to start paying ourselves salary. So yeah, it took 3 to 4 years. I totally forgot that. I always forget the bad stuff.
Yeah, it's for a reason probably, but thanks.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions. I don't know, raise the hand first. So Fredilson.
Hello. Hi, Edward. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting and very entertaining. I'm glad to see that you have not regret your choice. So my question is, what's, let's say, the number 1 skill that you obtained during your PhD that you're using right now outside of academia?
Critical thinking. And you won't know this unless you work in an environment with people who haven't got a PhD background. We find it very difficult to hire people who don't have PhDs just because we've learned to think in a particular way. Now, it's great if you apply to a company like us, but if you apply to a company that doesn't understand the value of a PhD, you've got to decode that into what is critical thinking, what is problem solving. It translates into, I will be more valuable to you because I will think about the best way to get something done. So whereas a graduate will, they'll smash into the problem and they'll do what they've been shown how to do. My advantage is that I may spend a bit more time up front not generating output, but I will think about the best way of getting it done. And what I generate will be of much higher quality, more robust and repeatable.
Thank you. So we have a last question from Ricardo Louro. Ricardo?
Hi, Edward. Very nice presentation, very entertaining, as has been said before. I have a question related with a comment you made early on, which is, if you hire a PhD, you spend some time breaking it down and then rebuilding again. That feels a waste of your time as a company and a waste of our time as university, because we work a lot to make PhDs, to make good PhDs. That's what a PhD program is about. And what you are telling us is, okay, that's fine, but now we are going to destroy all of this and build something else. My question is, and this is more a philosophical question, how could we bring academia and the companies together better so that both of us would benefit more from our efforts? You see the point?
Fantastic, fantastic.
If we did it correctly, if we did it correctly, you would not waste that time in the early stages of hiring someone, and our training would be more adequate for the wide world.
I've got two bits of advice then. Until you asked the question about the solution, I was only focusing on the problem. And the answer to the problem is that the skills that PhDs have, they kick in after a couple of years. So it's difficult to see the return on investment in the first couple of years if you choose to go down one of these other business or consulting or whatever route. But then after about 2 or 3 years, the career acceleration of a PhD will just do this compared to a normal person, because they have the ability. What they'll do with those 3 years is they'll gain so much more than a graduate. So, for a PhD student, don't worry too much about being. It was a flippant thing, and if you want to join McKinsey in Boston and an investment bank, they've really got one way. It's their way, so they will break you down and rebuild you. So the answer to the question, though, is what are the two things that in a PhD environment can be provided that would make a meaningful difference? So I think the downside of a PhD is that you're left for 3 years to struggle on a project. And there are some good supervisors out there, but most are too busy, under-resourced. So a PhD will be struggling on their problem for 3 years. They may have some attention, but you become a bit feral, like a wild cat. Which is you learn your own habits and your own ways of dealing with pressure and timelines and stuff. And that doesn't necessarily make you a good professional in sort of an environment where you need to wear a suit and you need to behave a certain way. And if you're sent an email, you respond within an hour. So the professionalization around communication is super important. If every PhD came out of a PhD program having been trained in how to be professional in your communication more complicated than just an email and verbal, but also stakeholder management. If you've got somebody at your level or senior to you who've sent you a question or a request, they need to hear from you that you've heard them. So the first email back is, I've understood your request. I'll get back to you in 24 hours. Well, I need to do this, that, and the other. So professionalizing communication and stakeholder engagement is one thing. The other thing is actual tangible project management skills, because a lot of people come in from PhD and they think, I've had a timeline, I've had a 3-year timeline to achieve something. And if you're working on 3 projects simultaneously, your time becomes such a valuable commodity that you can't treat it the way you did as a PhD. So project management, stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, and communication.
Thank you.
Great. So I think we don't have more time for questions. I believe there would be more questions, but thank you very much, Edward. It was really enlightening. So
my pleasure. And if you've got any questions by email, I'm happy to answer them as well. So if there are further questions or you think about what you've heard and I'm happy to do it by email.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much both. Great talk, Edward. So let's continue.